Hey, hello, hi everybody. Paul McFarland here again with you. And you know why we're here. We're here to talk about what I believe is the greatest work in the history of the world, so you can get inspired to make whatever you're working on even better. You don't have to become a fanboy supreme dork geek champion of the world about Chiat Day, although I think it's a good idea. But you can watch these videos and get ideas, get inspired, right? And if what you're doing right now is going to start a business, if you're, call me, if you're thinking of changing your advertising or marketing, well, call me. If you're going to start, a TikTok or an Instagram campaign, probably call me. Here's one for you. From the Rizzoli book, we're going back in the year to 1971, although it doesn't matter. This is a somewhat famous Honda TV spot that was called Honda versus the Apple. In this case, it was also Honda versus the chair. It was with the guy who was on, the Bob Newhart show, the always depressed guy. I can find his name, but if you know what I mean. If you know who I mean, you don't need to know the name. And if you don't know who I mean, it doesn't matter. And these two commercials are so simple and so powerful and good, they're not old. They could be something so easily converted and run on TikTok, Instagram. You could probably make a Twitch channel about it for that matter. What is it? It's these two. Very simple. Very, 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 very simple. See? Very, very simple. I will read you the scripts. The first one. And they were called things like comparison test number 263 and number 262. Did they do that many? I don't think so, but you get the idea. Comparison test number 263. Now, let's just look at this. Let's slow down and make sure you get all this. Why do you call it comparison test number 263? It's to give the impression that Honda is relentlessly looking at their own product in comparison to other things in the world, that somehow they are studiously, fastidiously, obsessively self-examining. That's a good thing. Now, these videos I do, sometimes I think I've doubled up in some of my numbers and I haven't been really sure. I don't really care, but I try and keep them as accurate as possible. I think we're in the mid-50s now. So here we are. Comparative test number 263. The Honda versus the chair. Now, the Honda, see, because they started with the Honda car. The Honda is actually, could have been a Honda versus a chair. A Honda versus an Apple, but the Honda versus the chair. Isn't that more interesting? See, even your choice of the article, indefinite or definite article, that choice makes it more interesting. No, most people just start typing and then pay attention to it anymore. Innovate the mundane, innovate the mundane. The Honda versus the chair. So comparison test number 263. The Honda versus the chair. And Richard Kiley, guys. This is a new economical Honda Civic. This is a chair. The Honda has front-wheel drive, rack and pinion steering. The chair doesn't. The Honda has room for 4 adults. The chair doesn't. The Honda comes in both the sedan and the hatchback models. The chair doesn't. And he sits down in the chair. Now, we're going to talk about exactly why it's written this way after I share the second one, which is the for whatever reason, better known one. Comparison test number 262. The Honda versus the Apple. This is the economical new Honda Civic. This is an Apple. The Honda has front-wheel drive, rack and pinion steering, gets up to 30 miles to a gallon of gas. The Apple doesn't. The Honda has room for 4 adults. The Apple, 2, maybe 3 worms tops. The Honda comes to both sedan and hatchback models. The Apple, no chance, because he picks it up and, of course, takes a bite of it. The little sidebar story in the Rizzoli book, which will be a nice segue into what I really want to tell you about this campaign, says, and the Rizzoli book, people are quoted directly, but except for Jay and Guy, no one is referred to by name for the reason I gave you earlier. If you know who it is, then it doesn't matter. And if you don't know who it is, it doesn't really matter. Unless you're me, and then you relentlessly find out, and you call people, and you run people down, so you know. The quote says, I recently did a spot for a client that's a lot like Honda and the Apple, and when I presented it to the client, the guy said, hey, that's Honda versus the Apple. I said, you son of a bitch, that spot's 20 years old. How the hell do you remember it? He said, I remember it. And I said, well, it's never beneath me to keep a good idea going year after year. True story, that people remember commercials, and if you're the one who did it, or selling it. So what do we have here? A comparison between a car and chair and a car and an apple. You don't need to read much into it. They're as arbitrary as they could come up with. But the point is, what a neat trick this is. Every company wants to talk about all the reasons why they're so great. Every product wants to say all the reasons why it's so special. Well, you can do that, and it's boring. But if you do that in comparison to something else that's silly or pointless, that's interesting and maybe even funny. You have a way of hooking the viewer, and I do mean hooking the viewer or the listener at this point. And some of this actually could be done in radio if you think about it, and if you know anything about radio. If Honda just said, this is the new economical Honda Civic. It has front-wheel drive, rack and pinion steering, room for 4 adults. Comes in both sedan and hatchback models. Honda. Oh, that was simple, nice. But you see, by comparing it to the chair, everyone wonders, well, where is this going? To an Apple? Where is this going? This is ridiculous comparison. It's a ridiculous comparison, so I'm interested. See? Instead of just telling your product points, you do a comparison. Not against the competition, the real competition, because that is actually quite boring, but against something ridiculous, which makes it interesting. What are they getting to? What's the point they're making here? Well, the point has already been made before you get to the end. Comparison test number 262. Well, did they do 263? Yeah, that's the chair. Did they do 264? Did they do 275? Did they do 18? Again, it's branding. We relentlessly study our product. Why? To make it better. Well, hopefully Honda really did that. And if they didn't, well, shame on Chiat and Honda for pretending that they did. But come on, Honda, we know. If you're old enough to remember when Honda was the most well-loved and popular car in the United States, there's a reason for it. When U.S. cars were, Hondas were just, and small. I remember in university, one of my great friends, still alive as far as I know, he had a little Honda Civic, and it was like the smallest car on campus, and on campus they had sold so many more parking permits than there were parking spaces, and when it snowed, those number of spaces was cut down by 30%. If there was just half of a space somewhere, he could park in it. So smart. He may never see this video, but he knows I know. I think he's smart. And speaking of smart, Chiat Day. 1971, actually, but it doesn't really matter. This is a timeless idea. When you take a client and you want to get across the points, well, you can do it in print, you can list it and hope people read it. But why not make it interesting? Anytime you have a product, a service, a brand, where the client really wants to get across how wonderful it is and tick off all our superiorities, maybe consider making a ridiculous comparison. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You could, say, take a SaaS company of some kind, whatever it does, it saves time and money, and compare it to a water buffalo. You could compare it to a model you build of a battleship, in a box. You could compare it to a bag of, jujubes. You could see, you can do this all day. But the main thing is you're constantly saying you're constantly comparing, you're getting your points out there in a way that is not offensive to the viewer. They will actually forgive you for doing it in an entertaining way. I'll say that again. When you've got dull points to make it funny. And the audience will give you permission and forgive you for ticking off all your boring points because of the way you did it. It's comedy. You could take someone talking about the benefits of the Honda Civic by a person who takes off his clothes until he has, pink heart, boxer briefs on. You could do it while someone bakes a cake on a treadmill. But you have to be careful. You see, you can take that too far. So I'm brainstorming with you live that if you want to do a goofy comparison, the goofy comparison needs to remain small, and yours remains big. The goofy comparison has to be just big enough to make it fun and to keep people watching. But see, a lot of idiots who make really big commercials with comedy, they make the comparison, the metaphor, so big you don't remember what the product was. And the metaphor that's being expressed is so irrelevant, not simply in comparison, but in execution, that people don't remember what it was all about and object to the whole commercial. Or they'll remember the funny thing, but they can't remember who it was for. See? 20-something years later, the writer found someone who said, I remember that spot. Comparisons. It's a jumping off point. If you think it's boring, give it to me. If you're understanding what I'm saying, play with it and go deep and look at a lot of options and find the simplest and the most interesting. That's how it works in any media, anytime. Honda versus the chair. Honda versus the apple.